I welcome to another episode of Canute Exploration, your topic in a podcast. You know, you will see a lot of books around me, right? I love books. I often go into the bookstore and just purchase books, right? You know that I'm also a published author, and I basically love to read books and engage with people who are authors, and I know that those persons who write like myself, we often write about our life experience. We experience not only mean that the things that we have gone through in our life, but the things that we have seen, and we try to write about it. I have written Oriental Ghost just to ensure that the beginning of this COVID situation lives on for years and years to come. So I had written Oriental Ghost as a documentation of that. You will see that on Amazon as well. But I have a guest today, Teri Brown. She will be talking about her books and how she get started in this writing thing. It must be a very exciting, very encouraging story for those persons who want to write. And Terry will tell us all about that. And some of the things that you need to do if you are going to be engaged in this writing thing. What do you need to do? The research that you need to have done. Trust me, this writing thing is not an overnight thing, right? There are a lot that goes into it, and my guest will talk to me about that. Will talk to us about that. I am Dr. Canute White, and you're listening. You're watching Canute Exploration. Your topic in a podcast. Let Terry in. Terry, how you doing?
Hi, fine. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. But Terry, I'm going to put you on the spot later because there's a question that I love asking my guests. Perhaps you know about it, and it's important for my listeners, my viewers, to understand where you're coming from. But before that, Terry, who is Terry? Let me find out, who are you really?
Who am I? Well, that's a great question. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. And no, actually, I hope that that answer changes all the time
Okay.
because I kind of went through a period of my life. I was a mom and I have 4 children and I was raising them. And I really, really, really focused on being that mom. But I kind of let a lot of the rest of me and who I was and what made me happy and what made me tick kind of sit on the sidelines. I don't regret that. I'm glad that I did what I did for my children. But now that I'm kind of past that stage, I hope that every day I'm learning something new and every day I'm becoming something more and that I'm constantly like stretching and whatnot. So, who am I right now? I'm a mom, I'm a grandma, I'm a wife. And I am a relatively new author, and I put my first book out in January. So,
Cool. I love that. Congratulations on that. But this is the question I want to ask you, ask all of my guests. Tell me about your childhood. Who's that little Terry growing up at age 6, age 8, 12?
all right. So I was born in Athens, Greece. My dad was in the Air Force, and there was a joint Air Force base there. And I don't remember it. We moved when I was 2. I was in Canton, Ohio. When I was 4, I used to tell people that I wanted to be 3 things when I grew up. I wanted to be an Olympic ice skater, which is really interesting because I am the least athletic person you have ever met in your life. And then I said I wanted to be a brain surgeon, which is also interesting because as I got older, I recognized that I don't like the sight of blood. So brain
Yeah.
surgery was never going to be it. But I
Right.
also said that I wanted to be an author, which I think is really cool that I actually got one of the 3 right.
I
Um,
love that.
yeah, and so, I think in my early years, I was, the pretty traditional American kid. I rode my bicycle everywhere. I played tag outside until it was dark. Um, I had a mom and dad who loved me, and I, went to school and I wrote poetry as a teenager. Whenever a boy would hurt my feelings and like crush me, I wrote the typical teenaged
I know,
angsty
right?
poems. Um, and then we moved to North Carolina when I was 15. And for about a year, I hated my parents. I could not believe that they had, uprooted me and moved me to this. It was a tiny, tiny little town in the middle of North Carolina in 1979. There was one stoplight. And I had come from a town where I could get on the city bus and go to the mall with my girlfriends.
Right.
And now I was in this town that had more trees than people, and I felt like I had been completely uprooted, and I was very angry. I really could not believe that they had done this to me. But as it turns out, I still live in North Carolina. So it's over 40 years, and here I still sit, and I love it here, and I'm so glad we moved. I went to the North Carolina School of Science and Math, which was a really cool experience for my last 2 years of high school. I went off to college, and I didn't even consider getting a degree that had anything to do with writing, because my parents believed that college was to get yourself a degree that would get you a job, and writing was not a job, it was a hobby. And so no way would they have entertained the idea of me getting, a degree in anything that had to do with writing. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I have 2 majors and 2 minors, and I haven't used any of them. So it was a complete, well, it wasn't a waste of time. I'm glad I went. But I mean,
Right.
I've never actually taken those degrees and did what my parents suggested, which was get a job with them. And then I got married. I had 4 children. I got divorced. I remarried, and that was probably one of the biggest mistakes of my life, because he turned out to be an emotionally abusive person. And so that's kind of the early years. I don't know how far you want me to go.
I see that you have moved away from childhood, but that's okay. It's very interesting. Very interesting, because my listeners, my viewers will always hear me say that our adversities are not for us but for others, and we have all gone through some sort of adversity in our life.
Yeah, we have. There's no doubt.
So yeah, I understand. But before I continue into some of the questions that geared towards your book, your writing, you were in the military, the Air Force, some form of a
no, my father was. My father was.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So
go ahead.
Yeah. So as a small child, my dad was in the Air Force. But what's interesting is even though I don't have a lot of memories of those years, I do have a strong feeling of patriotism, because that really shaped my dad. My grandfather, his father was in World War II, and that shaped my father. So my father wanted to join the military the way his dad had. And that kind of shaped me in terms of, like, what do I think about the country that is mine, that I live in.
Right.
And I mean, I grew up with a flag in the front yard. And to this day, my dad has passed now, but my mom has a flag in the yard with the light on it, and that automatically goes up and down, and the whole thing, and it's just very much part of who I am. So yeah,
that's great. I love that. And so you were a military child as well, and that's important, right? You have served, even though it wasn't you directly. You have served because you have put up with daddy not being around.
That's true.
So you have served. Hey, Teri, this writing thing, I'd like to get into that. How did you start writing? Tell us about that beginning.
So, it's interesting. I started writing in 2000 for small businesses.
Okay.
And I did it because I needed a job where I could be at home with my children and still bringing in an income. And I found that there were a lot of small businesses who had amazing ideas, but they weren't very good at getting them down into words. And so when you would go and look at their websites, for instance, the articles and things that they would have up, weren't very good and didn't reflect really who they are or what they could do. So I started working with small businesses, helping them with their content to make it so that they sounded as professional as they really were. The number of times I would have people tell me, "Oh, I have an article and I just need you to brush it up a little bit." And I would read it and think, "Oh, it needs more than that." You know?
All right. Yeah. Yeah.
But so that's where I started. And I wanted to write fiction, but I was afraid to write fiction because when you write an article for a small business, yes, there was some of me in it in the way that, what word usage did I pick? But really, the topic had nothing to do with me. And if someone didn't care for the article, it was probably because they didn't really care about home inspections or real estate investing or whatever it was that I was writing about. And so there wasn't anything terribly scary about that. But writing a novel, I mean, those characters are yours.
Yeah.
They're your invention. They're like your children. And if someone didn't like that kind of writing, well, that's just totally different. And at the time, I was living in this emotionally abusive relationship.
Yeah.
So I couldn't handle the thought of being put down again. I mean, I was constantly being put down anyway, and so I didn't believe I was good enough, and I just didn't get started and wouldn't get started. And I finally got out of that relationship in 2017. It took me 14 years because I'm bullheaded and was insistent that I could fix this thing, and it takes two people to fix it, and
Yeah.
he wasn't willing. But the minute I got out of that relationship, all of a sudden the words they were there. And I started writing. And I wrote my first manuscript. It was 50,000 words. It's not good.
Mhm.
It really is not very good. But it was my first one.
Yeah.
And it had a beginning and a middle and an end.
Right.
And it was 50,000 words long, which meant that I had that many words in me. Because that's always a fear. I'm going to go write a novel and I'm going to get, 3,000 words done and that's going to be it. I'm going to have nothing left to say. So it was like, okay, I can do this. But what I learned was, for instance, that my first character that I wrote, she was perfect. Absolutely perfect. The woman could do no wrong. It was like, sharks would be after her and she would just come up looking beautiful. I mean, I couldn't let her fail. Well, because of that, she was very flat, and she wasn't exciting. There was nothing that you wanted to read about her. You didn't connect with her because you don't know anyone that perfect. She was rather yuck, but that's where I was at the time. So my second manuscript, in my second manuscript, I realized, oh, I need to have, there has to be character flaws and there has to be issues, and she can't or he can't become perfect immediately. I need to let this person fail. It needs to feel more like real life.
Right.
So the second manuscript is not a whole lot better than the first, but I learned, and then I had a third one, and then a fourth one, and finally I wrote Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, which is the one that came out in January. So
Wow. It's interesting because you said something about, hey, I wrote this character, but guess what happened? That's where I was.
Yeah.
And it tells me that, writers like us, we tend to write about where we are a lot of time, build characters based on the experiences that we are having. But I need to ask you this.
Yes.
That's where you were. But did it ever comes to mind that, hey, I need to be somewhere else. So let me develop this character that is somewhere else, who is somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that a lot of my characters, people ask me, well, when you're writing, is it kind of autobiographical? And I said, I don't believe there is an author out there that can say that their characters don't have a little bit of themselves. If they are doing that, that would really surprise me, because all of my characters have me. And sometimes they have me the way I wish that I was.
Yeah.
And sometimes they have me the way I used to be, or sometimes they have me living like that alternate reality. What would have happened if I had made this decision instead?
Yeah.
Where do I think my life would have gone? And
Yeah.
that's the me that it is. But I think that all characters have you in another space.
Yeah.
And so when I wrote my perfect character, she needed to be perfect because I needed to be perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't allow myself to fail, and I couldn't allow her to fail. But yeah, as I kind of moved into a different place in my life, I recognized that, first of all, we all have times where we don't succeed as gracefully as we would like to, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
that
good.
and that that's okay, and that's what makes me human, and that's what makes my characters human and relatable. And
Good.
so I was able to start allowing them to have real feelings and real emotions and real characteristics, that make them very relatable to the people who read them.
Yeah. This is Canute Exploration, your topic in the podcast. I am Dr. Canute White, sitting in with Teri Brown. Teri, I saw something somewhere on your website, and it connects with me because you are suggesting that these characters that you have in your books, in your writings, are characters that your readers would like to go out with, go to lunch with. They're feel good characters. Talk to me about that concept.
I when I read, I love to connect with the characters. And they don't even necessarily have to be someone that makes me feel good as much as it's someone that I I understand. I understand their motivation, or I understand what's driving them, even if I don't like them. And I think, "Oh, that's a horrible villain." I can say, but I know what's driving that character to be the way they are, which makes them real. And although I might not want to go to lunch with that kind of character too often, I might love to sit down with them just for a moment, and say, "So tell me a little bit about your childhood, or tell me a little bit about that time that," just to kind of like, get to know them better. And since I love to interact with characters in my mind that way, that's what I try to do when I write. So I make sure that my characters have, depth and passion and feelings and things that go wrong and ideas that are just totally incorrect, that they have to discover themselves, that this isn't getting them what they want out of life, that those thoughts aren't helpful to
Yeah.
them. And so yeah, I try to make my characters, and so that's what it says on my website, is that I introduce my readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch.
Mhm.
So
We talk about when you started to write, and some of the challenges that you have had, and you want to get them out there that people can read. But I'm not sure if it's deeper than that. You know, it might sound like the same question, but the why do you write it more relates to where do you want your writing to go as it relates to impacting others. It's the readers. Tell
right.
me about that.
So it's interesting. When I wrote Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, it's a story of Ukrainian women, and it happened to come out in January, right before this current Ukrainian crisis, which was completely just coincidental. And I don't know that I had really considered what I wanted my writing to do. I think I had just felt that, I'm going to write a good story and people are going to read it. But because of the timing of this story, I realized that Sunflowers had the ability to do something, which was introduce people to Ukrainians, so that when we're thinking about this Ukrainian crisis, we're not just thinking about this group of people as a whole, but specific individuals that you've kind of met through my story. And then I recognized that's what literature really does. Is it introduces us to times and places and people and situations that we probably can't experience on our own. Or even if we could, maybe it isn't one we'd want to tackle, you
Right.
know? So I could never be a president in the 1800s, but I can read about one,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm not likely to ever live in Africa, but I could read about someone who has, right? And because of those experiences, that reading, I can gain like a compassion and an empathy for people and places and things that I might not have otherwise. It broadens my understanding of the world. And so that's kind of what I hope my writing will do. I've just written my second novel, which will be coming out this January. It's called An Enemy Like Me. And it's the same kind of thing. I want people to start thinking about what is an enemy? How do we make someone an enemy? Well, we make someone an enemy by focusing on the things that are different about them. Right? But what if we did something different? What if we focused on the similarities? What would happen then? It's much harder to have an enemy if you can see how alike you are with them, right? And that's kind of what this book explores through the World War II as the backdrop.
It's interesting though. An enemy like me. I read a bit about where you're going with it, and it tells me that we might dislike the enemy, we might see the enemy as being, not worthy, but indeed we are like the enemy. We are just thinking like the enemy. We're really acting like the enemy. What are you really saying? It's interesting that you said that.
Yeah, so to me, because this story is about a first generation German American, and he ends up fighting in World War II in Germany, and he recognizes that in terms of the enemy and himself, there are far more similarities than there are differences, right? And it kind of is like, wow, that's this concept. And my husband and I rode across the United States on a tandem bicycle.
Yeah.
Okay, so we rode 3,102 miles, which is a long time to be on a bicycle, out in the air and going across the United States. And we met so many people from all walks of life, because when you're out riding on a bicycle, you don't just meet people who are just like you, right? Not when you're riding that far. And so we met people who grew up very differently than I did or my husband did. We met people of different colors and different religions and different nationalities and different political orientations, and you name it. But you know what we found is that we were able to find a commonality with every person we spoke to. And that as we focused in on those things that connected us, everything that could have torn us apart didn't matter anymore. So, you look at all of the isms that we have and all of the phobias that we have that people, group you into these groups. And then if that group isn't like your group, then you can't like that group, right? Because that's where the isms come in. And what if instead we just focused on the things that made us the same?
Yeah.
You and I, we have a lot of differences, but the similarities are we both love books. Right. We both love writing. We both love what writing and books can do for people, right? Yeah. And we could sit and talk about that all day, every day for weeks or months, and it wouldn't matter what our belief systems were in other areas, because we were focusing on the things that made us the same. And I think that's kind of what reading books can help do, is you learn about people that you just wouldn't know about otherwise, and then it gives you a common ground with them. So that's what I'm hoping my books do.
Interesting. And I mean, I'm really enjoying this because it's very interesting. And I like that book, the enemy concept. And, it's very interesting. I'm hoping to read that when it gets out. Tell us though, how long it takes you to write a novel.
So, yeah, I write very differently than a lot of people. I used to think that I didn't do it correctly, and now I've just realized that I just have a process that works really well for me.
Okay.
So I contemplate a book for a long time. and the characters will be talking in my head, and I might scribble a few notes, but I'm not actually writing anything. I'm just kind of letting the story percolate in my mind. Then I get a big period of time that I know that I can do nothing but write. And I usually go on a writer's retreat or something
Okay.
where I'm not in my home and there's no dinner to worry about, no dog to let out, no laundry, nothing. It's just me and writing. So I wrote Sunflowers Beneath the Snow and An Enemy Like Me. The first draft of both of those took 2 weeks each.
Mhm.
So I just sit down and I write somewhere between 50 and 60,000 words in 2 weeks. And I just get the whole story out of my head and onto paper. Then I usually take about another week, usually a couple months later, I let the book sit. Then I go back and I read it again and I figure out, okay, where are the holes? What did I not say enough of? Which characters are lacking? Is there anything that doesn't make sense that I need to go back and fill in? And I'll take another week, about a week of a getaway from my home and work on that and get that second draft done. And then I usually spend somewhere between 40 and 60 hours doing all of the little edits that my editor suggests.
Right. Yeah, I know
And
that.
then it's kind of done. So yeah, I tell people that I'm a pantster. There are the people that plot everything out. That's not me. I'm a pantster. My voices tell me what to say and I just start going.
Yeah.
And then I tell people that I'm also a binge pantster. So I might write for 2 weeks and then I might not write again for 2 or 3
Right.
weeks
Yeah.
because I don't have anything left to say. And then I'll start writing again and do that again. So yeah, I'm a binge pantster.
Yeah. And I know that. I being a writer, I know that. Sometimes you just take a break. It's not like
Yeah.
nothing else to say that you know.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
again, I'm not sure if you're the sort of a nocturnal person who will, sit up in the middle of the night and write like myself. Talk to me about that. Do you do that?
Yes, I do. So sometimes, you just can't sleep because whatever the thought is, it's now got you awake. And so the best thing for me to do is to get up and write whatever that is in my head. Sometimes I don't write it real thoroughly. Maybe I just
Right.
write enough that I'll remember it the next day so that I can sit down and write. And then sometimes it just takes over and, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm in my office typing. So
I know, right? I know, I know. All right, let's talk to the young writers, those persons who are coming behind us in terms of writing, those persons who are thinking about writing. Just recently, a gentleman come to me and say, "Hey, I know that you're a writer. I have this book in my mind, and I want you to assist me with this book." So talk to that man and others.
yeah, I waited a long time. I kept waiting for the right moment or a class that I could take that would tell me what I should be doing or I don't know, a degree or something. And I don't think that's the way to go. I think the way to go is if you have a desire to write, you need to start writing because you're not going to get better at it by thinking about it. You don't become a better tennis player by thinking about tennis. And you don't become a better artist by thinking about painting, right? And you don't become a better writer by thinking that you're going to write. You need to go ahead and just start doing it. And then once you've written for a while, I really strongly believe that you should have someone that you trust, that you can give your work to, who can tell you both the good and the bad. What works for them, what isn't working for them. And then more importantly, why isn't it working for them? So that you can start developing your craft and learning what is it that is, first, what is good? Because inevitably there'll be good things that are going on with your novel. But there's going to be bad as well. And so listen to those things. The third thing that I tell people is don't listen to everyone because your book isn't going to be for everyone. There's more than one style of writing. Because it works for one author doesn't mean it will work for you. It's okay to try it. And if it doesn't work for you, it's also okay to say this particular idea may be good for some people, but it's not good for what I'm trying to do. And it's okay to put that away. So those are the things that I tell people. Get started, get someone to look at your stuff and listen to what they have to say, and then be willing to also put what people have to say to one side so you can stay true to who you are.
I love that. I love that. And indeed, even as a published author, I take some of those advice from you too, because it's important for us to always remember some of the things that you have said, so that we can get better and better. But Teri, I want know your contact. I will certainly, my audience will certainly see here, you're telling them now about your contact, and they will certainly see in the description of this episode where to go and find you. But tell us about your contact.
Okay, the best place to find me is on my website. So it's www.terimmbrown.com, and that's Teri with one R. So Teri, M like mother, Brown like the color.com. And while there, you can find me on all the social media. So I've got a link to everything. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and I've even got a TikTok. I don't know what I'm doing on it yet, but I've got one. So you can kind of find me there. You can also sign up for my newsletter. If you sign up for my newsletter, I will give you a list of the top or the 10 historical fiction that you've never heard of that will bring you to tears. So I had several of my readers tell me about some great books that they had read. So I've got that list. And I also have a contact page right on my website. Feel free to reach out and, ask me a question or send me a comment, or I love to talk to people who want to talk about books.
Lovely, lovely. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons why Teri want to talk to me and love to talk to me when she started, because I love books.
Absolutely.
Hey, Teri, nice having you on Canute Exploration, your topic in a podcast. Thanks for coming, Teri.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, take care. So that was Teri Brown. You heard her. I mean, she is an avid writer. She loves books just like me, and just like many of you out there listening, watching this episode of Canute Exploration, your topic in a podcast. I am Dr. White, and remember, check out Teri's website, www.teri with one R, terimbrown.com, and you will find out how to get her books, especially one that coming soon, right? You'll get more information on that. Keep in touch with Teri, right? And keep watching Canute, keep listening to Canute Exploration, your topic in the podcast. Goodbye.